All right, I have some feedback from the last two shows.
Feedback or follow-up?
Same thing. Follow-up, not feedback. Feedback is when you put the microphone and the speaker close together.
Well, or if somebody actually sends something in, like I've been imploring.
Yes, I meant follow-up. One of them was I said that I thought that in 2 shows ago, No Time to Die, I thought that that was going to be the end of, it was the end of Daniel Craig's James Bond, the Daniel Craig James Bond era. And I didn't notice it until the second time I watched it, that the end of it said James Bond will return, like it usually does. And that was interesting.
Yeah, I actually didn't think about pointing that out just because we don't really know what that means at this point, other than the assumption that there will be another character portraying James Bond at some point in the future.
Yeah.
Or another actor. Sorry,
totally.
another character.
Yeah, well, if it's, I expect it'll be something like, there's what, 25 movies? No.
Yes.
Yeah, 25 movies over the span of 60 years. I expect there will be something kind of like there's a bunch of Batman movies. And there's a bunch of, that's been relaunched a few times. So,
right. It seems to me like it's the kind of franchise that it doesn't matter if you have no plans in the foreseeable decade to do another James Bond film, that, maybe you want to play in that space, but as a franchise, at some point you're going to create a new version of the character and see where that story arc goes as well.
Basically, if they're making money, they're going to do it again. And, people like to see things they're familiar with, and it's making money, so there's going to be another one.
It will be sad for it not to be Daniel Craig, though.
I know. I don't, yeah.
Of course, it could also be equally just as fun and exciting depending on who they choose to portray Bond next.
It's gonna, because Casino Royale was such a drastic difference from everything that came before it, it's hard to not feel like Daniel Craig's portrayal of Bond is something very special.
At least until we see what they follow it up with.
Yeah. I also mentioned Batman because you might have seen some that could be considered a teaser based on some notes I dropped in for next show.
I saw. I have to wrap my head around some of the comparisons that I'm thinking of, but yeah.
Yeah, I thought about doing it for this show, but I was like, there's not enough time when I came up with the idea. So this will also give you a break from all the, the 3 episodes that we've done regarding this. So the other follow-up I had was about the Joe Rogan experience, and it occurred to me, I was like, he kind of ripped off Jimi Hendrix. It's the Jimi Hendrix experience.
I didn't even think about that, but yeah, that certainly makes a lot of sense.
For a given name starts with a J, with surname, and then experience. And I was just like, I don't know that he actually ripped it off, but I'm like, now that's all I can see.
Yeah, yeah, it's going to do the same thing to me.
The other thing is we used the words, we settled on brouhaha, but you mentioned kerfuffle and I mentioned row, and I feel by definition kerfuffle and row were better words. I looked up in the dictionary what a kerfuffle was, and it's a commotion or fuss, especially one caused by conflicting views. So that fits really well. A row is a noisy disturbance or quarrel. That doesn't fit quite as well as kerfuffle. And I think that brouhaha fits the issue least, and it's a noisy and overexcited reaction or response to something. I don't think it was overexcited. I think it was a reasonable kerfuffle.
I agree. I can also make the argument that some reactions could have seemed overreactionary if other actions might have been taken, but they weren't. So, based on what we have and where we're at today, I would say kerfuffle fits well.
You know, anytime I come across something like this, I think of the episode, I don't remember the season or episode number, but The Measured Response in The West Wing.
Yeah.
I believe President Bartlett asks Admiral, I'm blanking on his name, Fitzwallace, is it a proportionate response or a proportionate measure? I can't remember the exact term. And then, he asks what's a disproportionate response. And so, anyway, that's one of my favorite episodes.
Yeah, that was a good one.
The other thing I'd like to say is that I made mention of Joe Rogan being the type of person that would watch Fight Club and think it's a movie about the fighting. And I just want to say I've never heard him take that position regarding that movie. It was more of a comparison than an actual thing I've heard. So if he said that, then that maybe, it wouldn't surprise me, but it also wouldn't surprise me that he actually understands what the movie was about. But I was making
you were making a funny.
It's not a metaphor. It's not even a figure of speech. I don't know. I was just making a funny, I suppose.
I'm trying to remember where
it's a throwback because we've mentioned that on the show before.
I'm trying to remember now where I've heard making a funny. That phrase is popular for some reason. I'm blanking on it.
Do you ever use the phrase baddies for the bad guy? Instead of bad guy, say baddies?
No, but that's a fairly common trope.
I think other English-speaking countries use it more often than we do. But I got it from, way back in the day. 2 years from now, it'll be 30 years ago. There was a video that Nintendo of America and Rare, or Nintendo of America, put out for the forthcoming release of Donkey Kong Country, which was put together by Rare, those developers, and they're British, and they used, we've got goodies and baddies. The goodies were the characters that helped Donkey Kong, and baddies were the bad guys, and so I've always liked baddies, and so I've been using that term for a bit.
It pops up pretty often in cartoons as well.
Since we were just talking about Joe Rogan, there's a bite about him you listed.
Yeah, I figured I might jump down to that one. I found it interesting that Spotify has chosen to take action by removing some selection of episodes. And I didn't do any digging, but it seems that it's more in response to the further controversy of apparently a edited clip of him saying the N-word across multiple episodes as well that also prompted backlash. And so it kind of prompted the thought of they are taking some sort of action like they should as a producer, now a producer of the show, but what bar are they measuring against? There's no real transparency there from my perspective on what constitutes removal of an episode versus a broader disclaimer and maybe more transparent clauses or restrictions on what can be said, what can be done, content, basically. So I just found it interesting, figured I would mention it since it's current news.
That's a lot of episodes they removed.
Yeah, I saw a further follow-up that it was over 100, so I don't even know the exact count. I think this is a thing that's currently ongoing, and as it settles, we'll get a better picture for what the final number is and what they used to judge each episode by.
Yeah, it's it should now be called the Spotify presents the curated collection of the Joe Rogan Experience.
Yeah. Truth in naming will never happen, though.
I know. Speaking of saying the N-word, I saw a wonderful clip, and I think we could. I'll send you the audio so you can throw it in here. It was a clip of it was a white man. It was a panel of white men on a news show. It might have been, I don't know what news show it was, and it was 3 white men and a black man. I don't know if you know. I believe it was Delroy Lindo. I don't know if you know the actor.
It sounds familiar, but I can't place it immediately.
I recognize his face, and I had to look him up. But he's the movie that I recognize him from is Get Shorty. He played he was Bo Catlett in Get Shorty.
Okay.
So he's sitting there, and this white guy is complaining about how rappers can say the N-word and white people can't. And he's sitting there. He goes, "Say it." And it's you can say it. Go ahead. And I'm just like, wow.
Adrian, you get the benefit of no bid contracts because you're an African-American firm. Now, as a white lawyer, what am I supposed to think of that?
I don't know.
I think Chuck is pointing out a double standard here, Adrian. I mean, take hip-hop. We've talked about this on the show before. You have African-American rappers saying N-word this and N-word that, but a Caucasian can't.
So say it.
Say what?
Say the word you want to say.
I'm not saying that I want to say it. I'm just saying that I can't.
Sure you can. Say it. Say it right now. I will say it with you.
Okay, this is hypocritical. You know we can't.
Sure you can. This is America. Both of you. Say it.
All right, I think we can move on.
What? Why move on when you want to say it? Both of you want to say it. Huh? All together, everybody.
Anyway, that just made me think of that clip.
Yeah, it's not to necessarily take us on a tangent again from Bytes, because I think we have done that often enough anyway, but it's fascinating how much power we let words have when they're used in a way to attack. Like, have you ever thought about the distinction between how little power a word that is not used to be aggressive toward someone holds?
I think about it pretty often.
And it's just fascinating to me how we make those distinctions.
Yes, I've told my children that, all words are made up, and what's more important than good words versus bad words is that, well, first you have to know that bad words are something that people have decided. And you need to be careful about those bad words because not everybody has the point of view that we have, that words are used for good or for bad. Like I like comedians that say bad words. They make me laugh. But we can also use those bad words to be offensive. And when my younger son said to me, he's like, "Is shut up a bad word?" And I told him, no, it's not a bad word. But we use it a lot of times to hurt people. And so I told him, like, I've expressed the importance and the understanding that, like, how we talk to people is more important than the words that we use. But we can't always use the words we might want to use for various reasons. And they understand that. And so I made my house use whatever word you want. And then I had to dial back and be like, you get to say that. You get to say one a day. Because I just didn't want them to get into the habit and accidentally let it slip at school or something.
Right. Yeah, it makes sense. So just so I keep us from going down that tangent. So I had another bite. Yeah. I found it interesting that, what do you know, wearing a mask does actually offer some sort of protection for the wearer as well. It's not strictly to protect those around you.
Well,
that comes from the CDC. By the way.
Yeah, I appreciate that they did some studies on that, but it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, we're going to do a study so that we can say we did a study and actually have, verifiable evidence. What's the word I'm looking for?
Reproducible results.
Yes. But it was kind of, I love it was kind of, it's not, it's fairly, I would like, I keep wanting to say the word common sense, but I keep feeling like it's not appropriate for me to say that because of how people have behaved. But I love that meme I saw. It's like, if you walk around and you pee on somebody, you know, let's say you're naked and the other person's naked and you pee on them. And you pee on them, they get peed on. If they're wearing like jeans, the jeans
in some circles that's a fetish.
I know. I mean, no kink shaming. There will be no kink shaming in this show.
I wasn't.
No,
shaming.
you weren't.
You weren't. In some circles,
you were
it's
just
a
saying. Yeah. I'm just saying. Let's not. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you get peed on, but you're wearing jeans, you know, you're still getting peed on. But I mean, the jeans do offer some protection for the wearer. I mean, a fair amount of protection than just being straight peed on. But like if the peer is wearing jeans, you know, you don't get hurt at all. You don't get pee on you at all. Do you remember this?
Unless maybe it's really thin jeans and you're really close. I mean, there
if
are
you're
those
like,
arguments as well.
Yeah, like if you were like wait, you know, like sitting, if you were sitting in the peer's lap or the peer was sitting on top of you for some reason, because, you know, I'm sure that's a thing that people do too, and good on them for finding someone that will consent with them to do that.
But it was nice. I think it's a bit late to have performed this study, but at the same time, I would rather see it exist and have, you know, science stating the obvious instead of relying on people continuing to say whatever they feel is appropriate for masks.
I mean, at this point, you can legitimately, you know, we can you can show people, it's like, no, that's not what actually is happening. Not that that's going to change what they are and do and so forth, but it's there.
Yeah, if nothing else, it affords me the peace of mind that I can point to something that is a legitimate study and not just say, you know, if you think through it, all of these other things explain it. All you have to do is logically follow the next step. So, you know, now it's spelled out somewhere.
Yeah. Well, I feel like this could tangentially relate to our topic tonight.
Yeah, potentially. I dropped the topic in because it bugs me. And it's one of those that I have no clue how to articulate my thoughts. And I figured either it's going to be the norm where we end up going on a nice rant about it, or maybe it ends up being a fairly short segment and we have time for the other topic as well.
Shall you introduce us to this topic?
Sure.
It's kind of infuriating to say, I mean, just the notion.
Well, and I think that's why I'm having so much trouble even figuring out, like, how would you introduce it in a way that isn't just read the headline? Because even the headline itself is so ridiculous that it's... Here, that's actually how I will introduce it. So
I think you should read the headline.
There was an article that was published not too terribly long ago as we record, that the GOP declares January 6th attack legitimate political discourse. And it was published in the New York Times. Another part of the article that's not a part of the headline, but that I found ridiculous in and of itself, is that Representatives Cheney and Kinzinger, isn't that how you say his name?
I'm not sure.
I hate that I didn't have it pulled up, but the two Republicans who are on the committee investigating the January 6th event, for lack of better phrasing, were also censured by the Republican National Committee. And I paused there, not necessarily for effect, but because the only things that run through my head at that point are variations of, are you fucking kidding me? And so I want to unpack that. And I want to start with a couple of quick definitions, because this is important to understand why it just completely boggles my mind that this is a true statement in 2022.
Let me quickly throw in here that the GOP made this declaration on the 4th of February, 2022.
Okay.
For the record.
I appreciate that. I didn't pull up the link, but that's why I put the link in there. So, legitimate political discourse. That's what I want to start with. And I want to start with legitimate. The definition of legitimate is that it is in accordance with law or with established legal forms and requirements. Another definition, just to provide, some better context, is that it conforms to recognized principles or accepted rules and standards. I don't know about you, but watching a group of people storm into a building in an attempt to perform violent acts against other human beings, I can't think of how any of that is legitimate.
This is from the group of the party that support, advocates the thin blue line. And this is from the followers of a leader that touted the rule of law. But what it turns out to be is only if it's for those things that we disagree with.
I agree with the sentiment, but it goes further than that. It's not even for things that they agree with. It's also all of the rules are irrelevant for those things that we choose to act upon because we don't like.
It's do as I say, not as I do.
That's a better way of summarizing it, I think.
Yeah.
So I can't even come up with a far-flung stretch of the imagination way to characterize any of the events of the January 6th attempted coup as legitimate.
It is the far-flung.
Well, no, I would expect the rationale is that the initial gathering prior to the attack on the Capitol, you could consider that legitimate protest.
Sure.
But that's it.
That's fine. You want to go here to a rally, that is totally okay. Nobody broke a law then.
But all of everything that occurred post breaching points where you are not supposed to progress any further without official business. So any barricades or anything around the Capitol building, as soon as any of that was breached, it's no longer legitimate.
Right. If they went up to the barricades and shouted for the rest of the day, that would have been fine. I would have called that a legitimate political discourse.
Yes, it would have been.
Mm-hmm. There's probably some things, some requirements with permits and so forth, but
I mean, maybe since you're talking about it's in Washington D.C.
Yeah. I mean, regardless, I'm gonna say, even just walking in a public area like that, protesting. I'm not sure what the permits would be, but let's say they don't have those permits. As if it had remained nonviolent and had remained, they had not, breached those barriers and they only stayed in a public place and no property was damaged. I wouldn't said, even if they didn't have permits, I would that's still, I'd turn a blind eye to that and be like, yeah, that's legitimate political discourse.
Yeah, I would be on board with it if it had not been what it was, for sure.
Right, it turned violent.
And even before the point of it turning violent, once you breach an established barrier, you are trespassing. That yes. Renders any further actions illegitimate.
Yes, agreed.
Once you add violence to that, it goes beyond an illegitimate gathering into a criminal assault of some fashion, but in its most innocent form, you could potentially go for aggravated assault or whatever the minimally introducible criminal charge would be.
In the case of somebody that got trampled, that would be I don't know if that would be considered involuntary manslaughter, I'm not sure. I'm not obviously not a lawyer, so I'm not sure what that would be. I'm not sure if it would be just considered accidental death. But yeah,
involuntary manslaughter is accidental death. Just FYI.
That's the fancy terms for it. Is that the book learning one?
It is.
Yeah. So, but it became violent, and so they broke those barriers. It was trespassing, then it became violent, and then it became, then they broke into the Capitol. And at that point.
Well, and there you're well beyond any just minimal criminal charges. You have reached a point of attempted coup. And it's an insurrection on domestic grounds.
Yeah. Like that's significant.
Yeah, and I think we've done a fairly good job of saying legitimate, that doesn't apply. That you can't use that to cover the events of January 6th. So I didn't put
discourse.
Well, I want to talk about political.
Okay.
I didn't put the definition in there because, realistically, it was politically motivated.
Yes.
Would I call it political action? Maybe. It's a stretch to an extent. I call it terroristic action, but that's maybe, me applying my own principles to it. So I'm okay with it being a political action. That's the reason I didn't call it out. It's a stretch, but sure, it's political.
I don't know. I wouldn't call it a stretch. I think many terrorist acts are political.
That's fair.
That doesn't legitimize it.
Yeah, agreed. But it's fair to say that they are politically motivated, for sure.
Yes.
So the third word, and this is where, if legitimate was already difficult enough to wrap my head around, discourse, the choice of discourse, not gathering or event or anything else, but discourse, really just completely boggles my mind. So just for the sake of anyone who doesn't know, discourse is a verbal interchange of ideas. Could also be defined as formal and orderly and usually extended expression of thought on a subject. And then yet another, even more kind of vague definition, to express oneself, especially in oral discourse. Are we saying that them yelling things as they violently attacked the Capitol was the discourse and we're ignoring the behaviors? Is that how we're making this stretch? Because I don't know about you, but when I think about discourse, I think about like what we're doing or just any random group of people sitting around having a chat.
The rally ahead of time could have been considered discourse.
Sure. I don't know that I would have considered it.
That's as close as you're going to get, though.
Yeah, agreed. So legitimate political discourse, according to the GOP, is a violent insurrection against the government. I have problems with that. I have deep problems with that. And I don't know how to reconcile it. This is truly the best expression we've seen of a political party not giving a shit about anything other than their own power.
Yeah.
Whatever serves their purposes, they're on board with, and anything else can go to hell in a handbasket.
Yeah.
I really don't get it. I have no possible way that I can accept any political organization or branch of government or something affiliated with a governing group to define the events of January 6th as legitimate political discourse. So all of that to be said, one of the things I did like seeing in the article, it's a quote from Cheney. And I'm going to read it. Hopefully I do it justice. I would imagine she can probably deliver it better than I can. I do not recognize those in my party who have abandoned the Constitution to embrace Donald Trump. History will be their judge. I will never stop fighting for our constitutional republic, no matter what. I like it, but there's only a couple of those people within the GOP, and one of them, at least one, if not two, are not planning to seek re-election. So you have a handful of Republicans who are professing the appropriate mindset. You have one who has made it clear that they will not back down, will not just drop out of races, and will continue to fight.
Yeah. How many Republicans do you think hold to that sentiment, but are just too cowardly to follow suit?
I'd like to be hopeful, but I'm not hopeful by nature. I would say if anyone has that sentiment, they've expressed it. Like I take a very realistic approach, because if you're in a position of being a representative or a senator, any elected official, and you hold this value and you don't say it, you might as well not hold the value.
I agree, but I think there's a lot of cowards in that party, and it's not limited to that party. But I think we are seeing I think there are a lot of cowards there. I think there are more people that are cowardly regarding this particular issue than are coming out. Because I can remember a few people that were. I can remember a few senators and Congress people that were that spoke in opposition to the events of January 6th right after they happened. Where Representative Cheney is the only one who has stayed the course.
And there were 6 Republicans who voted to impeach.
Was it 6 senators, and there's like 20 something Congress people?
Maybe. I didn't really pay attention because I knew it wasn't going to proceed. It sounds bad, but historically speaking, and given the current political climate, generally an impeachment vote is pretty much along party lines.
Yeah.
But either way, one of the things that I also found interesting, for all the things I dislike about Mitch McConnell, he did at least publicly state that the events of the 6th were not legitimate political discourse. This was in an article that was published today, actually, on the 8th of February, that it was not legitimate political discourse, and that the RNC does not have or should not have any business picking and choosing people within the party to support or not support. It should be supporting the party as a whole, regardless of differences of opinion. And I agree with that, even though it pains me to an extent to do so. But that is the way it should work. The National Committee should be supporting the party as a whole, not picking and choosing candidates.
Well, they're not supporting the party as a whole. I think a few episodes ago, I mentioned that there was a point at which Trump said he was going to leave the Republican Party, create his own party, and the GOP leadership caved to his demands, so as not to fracture the party. So, I mean, what is the party anymore?
Right. I'm not disputing that. What I'm saying is the Republican National Committee as opposed to the Republican Party.
Fair.
Because the RNC is who ordered the censure of Representatives Cheney and Kissinger. I'm going to have to look up his name. It's going to bug me that I'm getting it wrong if I am getting it wrong. So my apologies if he ever happens to hear this. But it's so baffling that the party would be, or that any political party would be so
No, it's not baffling. It's not baffling when you consider the gerrymandering, and it's not baffling when you consider...
No, yeah, I'm not... It's not like the whole acquisition of power. I was trying to think of what's the word for throwing yourself prone at the foot of someone. There's a word for it, and I couldn't think of it. But the fact that the Republican Party would be willing to throw itself on the floor and worship Donald Trump, that's the part I find baffling. Like, why don't you just pick somebody else? It's not like you don't have other people you can choose from that would appeal to the same general broad base of voters, that would at least not be...
prostrating themselves?
Yeah.
That's the word.
Maybe.
Prostrate.
Okay. Close enough to prostate, so it's all one and the same.
Where do you think no. It's actually not even close. Anyway,
yeah. But that's the part I find baffling. Like, why is there such an allegiance to this one person? Like, it's not baffling to me that they would do things for the pursuit of power. That makes sense, even though I disagree with it.
I mean, this one person holds the keys to the power. He tapped into something. He was in the right place at the right time. And he tapped into a festering sore. And now we have a disease has taken over that party. I mean, it was already it's already in a shitty state to begin with, but it's now diseased.
I guess the reason I find it so baffling is because there are a couple of just core fundamental things that I look at that I can't get past. One, I have never seen anything from him that I even thought was sincere. It was all stage, all presence, all manipulation, all for whatever gain he was getting out of the moment. I mean, maybe the events of the 6th, we saw some semblance of true personality, but that might be about it. And if you've crafted this persona and appearance specifically to drive something as far as public opinion goes, or media coverage, whatever, take your pick, anything in the public eye, and that crafted appearance also is just horribly off-putting for me. I don't understand how someone can find that appealing in the numbers that we have. Like, I guess that's the part that has really taken me by surprise. Like, I've known we've had horrifically racist bastards around us for decades. And I've known there have been horribly misogynistic people around for however long, right? Like, none of these individual things are things that surprise me. But the fact that you have almost half of the nation willing to accept these things, that took me by surprise.
Yeah, I know.
As pessimistic as I am, I didn't think it was that bad.
I only realized that racism was as bad as it is maybe 10 years ago. So now seeing folks behave this way, I'm just like, I don't even understand, like, where's your sense of decency?
Well, and on top of that, like, how could anyone embrace this idea of another human being is beneath me? Like, you can certainly feel that someone is not as educated as you are. There's a measurement for that. But there's no scale where one human life is worth less than another, regardless of how despicable that human is. Unfortunately, life is life. It's a reason we have systems to prosecute those who void their social contract with society. And we have plenty of problems there. I don't want to derail the conversation even further. But it's one of those things that for the average day-to-day person, an average interaction, just going about whatever your business is every day, how is it that you can look at someone and not know anything about them and just, that person is so far beneath me, they don't deserve to be around? I cannot understand that mentality. And that's exactly what it is. Make no mistake. It is pure thought that other people are inferior to you that is the absolute definition of racism. Doesn't matter what the reason. Doesn't matter whether it's hair color, skin color, eye color, gender, sexual preference, shirt that they're wearing.
Identity.
Anything that you latch onto that says that person is subpar to you, it's a racist viewpoint. Let's actually be a little more generous. It's a discriminatory viewpoint.
Yeah. And it's prejudice.
Yes. And I don't get it. I can't wrap my head around how that view can be so widely accepted by so many people. So much so that they would like to see the President of the United States reflect those same views.
Would it be
fucking twats?
Would it be stating the obvious to say that it's just like maybe it's just a matter of lack of enlightenment?
Maybe. I mean, there is an element of how much of it is just not recognizing that actions and behaviors that have been taken for granted or exhibited over time are manifestations of that. But even then, I can only go so far to say that you don't have some level of awareness of what you're doing.
Right. I mean, you could go and you could look at human evolution and say the evolutionary trait of not trusting or somehow defining somebody that you don't know as your enemy, or somebody that is different from you, and however you define different as your enemy might be at one point in time evolutionarily advantageous. But the animal kingdom doesn't. I mean, there are primates that do exhibit this sort of behavior where, there are chimpanzees. Is it chimpanzees? I think it's chimpanzees that will go and attack other tribes of chimpanzees and destroy them. Like that exists. But you would expect, I mean, that's in there, and that nature is being tapped into, I think, purposefully. Like there are a certain number of educated people that are using that trait in a way to gain power for themselves.
Well, so the way you described it, I want to back up and unpack that slightly. Like tribal warfare or tribal conflict, I can understand that from an evolutionary perspective for sure. And I think that's a little bit different because you're talking about the survival of the collective. And that collective might be fairly small, but it is about this group recognizing that another group poses a threat. And I get that you can drill that down into, radicalization of the individual and the microcosm scale. But the thing I want to point out is that in general, tribal conflict generally was based more on competing for resources or something that truly meant survival historically. And it has evolved over time. And so maybe that is part of it, but that's what I think of when you talk about the evolutionary perspective is the competition for resources and what that translated into for survival.
I mean, that's where it came from, but now, I mean, I think the trait still exists. Like, I think it's something that, it doesn't get selected against. And so now it's being leveraged for the survival of a way of life, the survival of a patriarchal society, survival, access to power, because there's a limited amount of power. The resource is now power. And there are certain people that are leveraging this trait in humanity for their own gain.
All right. When you phrase it that way, I can see that. I can see that tapping into the same general psychological need.
Yes. It's exploiting it's exploiting a trait in humans for bad, for evil.
Well, yes, from our point of view, but evil is fairly subjective as well. You know, and we can do a whole show on this one. I don't want to derail it, but I want to explain the statement briefly. Our concept of morality is very much socially defined. And while we would love to say that there is an unequivocal moral truth, the fact is there is not. It all depends on culture and society, environment, a number of different factors that play into it based on where you are. And so I hesitate to say that it's being used for evil. It's being used to manipulate people for some purpose, yes.
But
it's a semantic argument for sure.
Well, I would say that the belief that any one person or group of people are superior to another group of people as human beings, I would call that evil. So
I would too.
So is it that they're exploiting evil in people for their gain of power, or is it that they're evil for doing that, or both?
Well, that depends a bit on your view of good and evil, right? And this is where I was drawing that distinction, is that good and evil are subjective concepts. What's good in one society may be bad in another, and vice versa. That's where, like, for us, where we live, I would absolutely say this is geared toward manipulating people for the purposes of evil, which also makes the manipulator evil. The only reason I walk back the evil piece is just recognition that what is good and what is evil is not clearly and unilaterally defined everywhere ubiquitously in a way that you could say, yes, this is absolutely good. Yes, this is absolutely evil for everything.
No, I understand why you're making this distinction, but is there society? Is there something at the core of humanity that cannot be erased or changed or modified, where we say that, this sort of manipulation is not ever seen as good, but it will always consider this evil? There's no culture or...
Well, I think it depends on what you attach to, because the initial statement was that this other person or group is different and therefore subpar or inferior. If you walk that back ever so slightly and talk about the manipulation of others, that's the part that I think can generally be agreed is evil.
Okay.
But there's always a caveat to that as well, right? Because you can manipulate others to do good. And that opens up the ethical debate on what is ethically right and wrong versus what's morally right and wrong, and whether or not the end result has any sort of justification for the methodology used to achieve said result, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, you have a nice, long, philosophical and
perhaps a discourse
behavioral debate there. Yes. And it's a fascinating conversation, and one I'm more than willing to have, of course. But this is why I tend to argue against absolute statements, even though I make my fair share of them as well. It's just when I hear one that triggers that thought process, I try to remember to call it out. Because one of the big things that I want to make sure I always remind myself is I have very, very strong opinions on a lot of things. That doesn't mean I'm right. I'll say it as though I'm right. 99+% of the time. And I'll argue the hell out of it if I believe I'm right.
Until you no longer believe that you're right.
Correct.
Yeah. If only.
That's the way debate should work.
I mean, that's the whole, that is like the biggest difference, is that it's like you have people who say I'm right and that's it. There's nothing that's going to change my mind. And then you have other people who are like, I think I'm right and I'm going to argue that I'm right until something indicates to me that I'm not right. And at that point, I will take that in and understand it.
And reevaluate my position. Am I still certain that I am right in light of this new evidence or information? Or does this make me rethink some component of how I feel or what I believe?
If you don't have that attitude or that aspect or that outlook on life in general and many aspects of life, you are going to be problematic. It's going to be a problem.
I would take it a step further. If you don't have that viewpoint, you probably side with the thought that the January 6th events were legitimate political discourse.
The events of January 6th were neither legitimate or discourse. We have a number of different ways set up for you to get in touch with us to provide feedback, ask questions, or just comment in about something we've discussed.
You can hit us up on Twitter or Instagram at untitled_hosts, or shoot an email over to untitled.hosts@gmail.com.
Or get in touch directly with Jesse at jthart.com, or get in touch with me, John, via telepathy.
If you would like to support our work or are interested in listening to our new after-show feed, head over to patreon.com/theUntitledPodcast and take a look at the options we have set up.
Thank you for listening.
We hope you've enjoyed the show.
And we hope to connect with more of you as we continue this journey.
That's a wrap.